Dear students, welcome you in this lecture on post-colonial literature. In my previous talk, we discussed meaning of post-colonialism and various nuances of the word colonialism and imperialism. Today, I will try to make clear how two existing fields of study known as Commonwealth literature and colonial discourse analysis, they can be taken as antecedents or as root of post-colonial literature. Now, when I referred this, Commonwealth literature and colonial discourse analysis as root or as precursors of post-colonial literature, that means definitely I refer here post-colonialism hyphenated. And when it is hyphenated, it means after colonial era or after independence, the time period I am referring. Because this post-colonialism or post-colonial literature in general or criticism in particular, it started existing during 1980s and 1990s as a category of study, as distinct field of study that we have already discussed in my previous lecture. But still, when we are going to discuss about Commonwealth literature, it becomes important to tell you here that most of the writers who are existing during the Commonwealth literature, they are the part of post-colonial literature also. So how intellectuals slowly and gradually they located some of the problems with this group that is called Commonwealth literature, and they suggested or they came out of this umbrella of this Commonwealth literature. But sequence wise we will discuss here what are the changes and how it developed, right? So when we go back and we look at the development of the Commonwealth nations, and if you look at the word Commonwealth, it signifies grouping of those nations which were under British Empire or which were under British colonial rule, right? So what happened that almost all the countries, like 54 in number, out of their own choice they formulated together, they configured a group, and this configuration, this group was headed by the British monarch, and this British monarch was chosen with a kind of consensus of these nations. So let me tell you that 1921 is the year when England was at its top in terms of its colonial rule and power, and 1931 is the year when this Commonwealth nations were grouped together, right? So when we just throw a kind of light over the Commonwealth nations, what do we notice? That certain anomalies are there, out of which I would like to mention here 2 to 3 anomalies. First of all, Britain was the part of this Commonwealth nation only in the form that it was heading this particular group, right, of the 54 nations. And second, that many countries were ruled by England but was not part of the Commonwealth nations. Third thing, that many countries were part of the Commonwealth nation but now not the part of the Commonwealth nations, because this group still exists. For example, Maldives is now not part of the Commonwealth nations, and recently I think one more country from Africa is now not part of the Commonwealth nations. So meaning to say, and fourth most important anomaly, that means United States of America, it was also ruled by England. It was also colonized by England, but it was never ever part of Commonwealth nations. Now, after taking a picture of the Commonwealth nations, when we move towards Commonwealth literature, what do we notice? That definitely this particular group is formulated, or this particular title on the name of the grouping of the nations, Commonwealth literature, it designates different category of literature or some speciality is there, right? So again, let me tell you tell you a fact that in 1964 in the University of Leeds, Britain, a conference was organized by University of Leeds, and that was Commonwealth Literature Conference. And what happened, that the aim was to depict all the literature produced by these Commonwealth countries under one umbrella. a kind of unification of all the English literary expression of the colonized nations. I think it will be better kind of expression, that how to bring together under one title, under one umbrella, literature written by Commonwealth countries. Now behind this, what was the purpose? Slowly and gradually it was stressed by the intellectuals of this Commonwealth countries, right? So let me tell you, just like America was not part of the political grouping of Commonwealth nations, in the same way, in the literature of Commonwealth, there is no role of America, or not a single piece of American literature you will find as part of the Commonwealth literature. And at the same time, England is also not contributing in this Commonwealth literature, meaning to say that it is a particular kind of literature where only colonized writers, they are writers of the colonized countries, they are writing in English language, and they are called as Commonwealth literature. To who is regulating? Britain is regulating, or Britain is making policies. So as I told you, that intellectuals slowly and gradually they brought shift in this kind of consciousness, and this is how people started realizing that we should change our stance of writing from Commonwealth to post-colonial. So I would like to refer here in this connection one very famous novelist, Indian-born novelist, Salman Rushdie, who is also part of your syllabi, and Midnight's Children you must have gone through. So you all know about Salman Rushdie. Around 20 years after 1964, when another conference took place of Commonwealth literature, and of which Salman Rushdie was part, he stated that this particular kind of organization in the name of literature, it is a hidden politics of the Britishers, or hidden politics of the Western country, especially of England. The reason is that those writers who were writing under this heading of the Commonwealth literature, definitely they are writing about their own nations and their own countries, their own culture, right? They are having essence of their own culture, values and meaning of their own culture. So Salman Rushdie points out that indirectly a strategy, a kind of policy is made by the Britishers in order to separate the literature produced by colonized nations writers in English language, as they cannot avoid English literature produced by the Commonwealth countries. So they thought that they just they invented a kind of a strategy through which they may separate literature of the colonized nations, because English is a global language. Now means at the time Commonwealth literature was flourishing, that means in the 1970s and 1960s, English has become a global language, and it was means through which one may express as a writer, as a nation, and that can be circulated in all over the world, and this is how you can be equal to those people under whom you have worked, that means who imperialize you, or who has developed a kind of habit to consider colonized nations always as inferior. So English, this language was such a power. By writing in this language, the writers of the Commonwealth countries, they had this opportunity that they can express their nationality, their identity, their isms, their philosophy, and they can be also equally regarded like other English writers. But a policy, Rushdie says, that made by the Britishers in order to separate the Commonwealth writings, Commonwealth literature in English, and as they were large in number, English writers, so they cannot be avoided. So if you look at the writings of R.K. Narayan, for example, because R.K. Narayan from India, V.S. Naipaul from Trinidad, West Indies, I think Catherine Mansfield from New Zealand, and most famous Chinua Achebe, who is part of your syllabus again, from Nigeria, they were the Commonwealth writers, right? So if R.K. Narayan is writing a novel, then definitely he will try to establish in his writing Indianness. or he will try to depict into existence the essence of the culture of India, not of Nigeria. Same will be case of the Chinua Achebe, right? That Chinua Achebe will try to highlight the culture of Nigeria, okay, the black culture, okay, not of Indian. So when you look at the writings of the Commonwealth literature, the idea of nationalism or the identity, the kind of country, the nation to which they belong, they have expressed that. So slowly and gradually, their eyes, like the policy makers of the Commonwealth literature, they were trying to show that how limited range of expression these literary writers are having, so they cannot have universal stance, or they cannot be taken equal to the writings done by the Britishers, right? So this was a kind of policy, and Salman Rushdie, in a very sound way, he has pointed out, or he brought this thing into existence. Now when we move ahead and we just look at the writing stance of Salman Rushdie, then we all know that he was from Mumbai, and for studies he moved there to England, and he got settled there. So now he is holding identity of England, but he kept on writing about India, and after him his family got shifted in Pakistan, so he is having also relationship with Pakistan, right? So the hyphenated identity which this figure Rushdie is himself considering in his personality as a writer, then means which culture he is going to celebrate, or which identity he is going to celebrate, as Commonwealth writer or as a writer simply, right? Or as a post-colonial writer, means post-colonial came later on, okay? So these are some of the problems located by figures like Salman Rushdie. Now if I have to exemplify the problem or why this shift was needed from Commonwealth to post-colonial, then let me tell you that the way strategy was made, it was to declare that the timeless literature cannot be produced by the Commonwealth countries, because whatever Britishers have written, it is to be studied, it is to be taken as timeless universal literature from by all over the countries. Whereas some of the countries are when writers are writing, they cannot be taken equal to them. So this was the reason that in order to separate, they created an umbrella of this Commonwealth literature, and this is how they were narrowed in one phrase, right, in one particular title. For example, nowadays Rabindranath Tagore, who is we all know being Indian, and we have studied him also. So recently in America he is getting popularized, his works are getting translated there. So now he is not under Commonwealth literature. Current scenario or current example I am just giving, that now a writer who is belonging to the colonized country can be studied with an equal kind of respect, with a same kind of regard in Western countries also, right? When you have come out of this Commonwealth kind of title, right? So these are some of the examples. Same can be taken as magic realism. Magic realism was also very popular in America, right? But many novelists from India, they have this great expression in this particular form of writing, in this particular tool they have used in their novels. Salman Rushdie is himself master of this particular type of writing, that is called magic realism. So meaning to say that what is popularized by West, either it is form of writing or any content of writing, it is to be taken universal, whereas the moment writers from the colonized country writing in English, they were separated under the title Commonwealth. The purpose was to restrict them to this territory only, so that they cannot step out the boundary that was created by the Western, especially by Britain, right? I hope now you are getting the problem that was associated with the Commonwealth literature. Now when we move ahead, one most important resistance I should quote here, and it is from the side of Amitabh Ghosh. I think the novel for which he got this Commonwealth Literature Prize, he refused to take that prize, and he said that this legacy, I think The Grass Place, the name of the novel that is most famous by Amitav Ghosh. So he said that the legacy of glorifying the colonial world must be stopped, and my refusal, my rejection of this particular prize is the proof of that. Okay, so slowly and gradually, when we look at these examples, we make a concept, and conclusion comes that all in all, 3 to 4 major problems were there with the Commonwealth literature. First one is that it was not cross-cultural in nature, means neither it was enough national nor enough international. Means in case it is enough national, then also it's okay. It is, means some of the literature, I'm not talking about all the literary pieces. Then if you look at the second point, that what is noticed, that glorification of the colonial rule and power, or extreme kind of hatred is shown towards the colonial rule and power, right? And third most important problem that was in the Commonwealth literature, that it was not including in its territory literature written by Commonwealth writers in regional languages or in other languages, right? So when shift takes place from Commonwealth to post-colonial, we notice that many writers like Derek Walcott, Thiago, Kenyan novelist, Chinua Achebe, as I mentioned, R.K. Narayan and Catherine Mansfield and V.S. Nepal, they all were there in the post-colonial world, right? But important change that took place the moment this particular term got established as a field of study, that it included in its territory literature written in other languages also. And let me tell you, best example, it's of Mahashweta Devi. And nobody else but Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, in her study of subalternity, Can the Subaltern Speak, is the most famous essay, and I will refer that when I will discuss more about the colonial discourse analysis, or while dealing with the adverse side. So in her example, she has quoted Mahashweta Devi as the representative of, as the embodiment of the subaltern consciousness, and she writes that Mahashweta Devi, she has developed out of her subalternity notion, this consciousness, a different vision in the field of subaltern studies, in the field of feminist studies. So this is one of the examples that how post-colonial literature encompasses in its territory not only literature written by English writers, but also written in other languages. Okay, and at the same time, a kind of cross-cultural tendency developed among the writers. So nowadays you are reading Wole Soyinka, or you are reading a writer from Australia, right? Means of all the nations which are called now third world countries. Okay, that means those countries which were earlier Commonwealth nations or Commonwealth countries, now called as third world countries. So from Australia, from Canada, from New Zealand also, and from the African world, when you read a writer, you find similar kind of experience, right? So this is how cross-cultural connection is noticed in post-colonial literature. So I hope that you should understood that why I focused here on this journey from Commonwealth literature to post-colonial literature. Now the second point which I described as antecedents or precursor of the post-colonial literature, it is colonial discourse analysis. So let me tell you that what is first of all called discourse, and for that matter we need to move into Michel Foucault, because without understanding Michel Foucault's conception of the discourse, you cannot have colonial discourse analysis. So here in this lecture I won't be able to compile Foucault's whole notion of the discourse, but one thing I would like to mention in general, that when we look after the colonial discourse, two things are most important. One is the mode of representation of the colonized people by colonizer, and what is the perception of the colonizer regarding colonized people, right? So the way you are represented and the way perception is developed regarding the colonized people, and the moment it is identified by a writer belonging to this colonized community, this discourse begin. So in order to formulate this analysis of the discourse, you may read many books and many writers, but I will suggest that you should go definitely to Kenyan novelist Thiago. You must read Michel Foucault. You must go to Frantz Fanon, because these people have well created these discourses. Frantz Fanon is the name. The moment you try to trace the ancestry of the post-colonial criticism, the first name that comes, it's of Frantz Fanon, who has fought battle against the Nazism in France, and who fought battle against the entire colonial practice of the France. He joined the Algerian battle and movement, and he was very closely associated with Jean-Paul Sartre and with Aimé Césaire. Aimé Césaire, whose Negritude is most popular, and the two very important texts he has produced, known as The Wretched Earth and Black Skin and White Mask. So if one wants to understand the colonial discourse analysis, must go through the Frantz Fanon, and I would like to mention here just 2 points from the side of the Frantz Fanon. The way he is referring the expression, the nigger, right, the dirty nigger, the term that he listened for himself by one white person, that means by a French man for himself. He deals with that experience, and he brings into existence that how brutal these people have represented us. So as I told you, two words, representation and perception. Like if you see somebody in color black, or if you see somebody is wearing dressing sense that is not matching to you, and or that is not suitable as per your standard of fashion, and you are in power, then you describe that this person is dirty, this person is senseless, this person is not having intellect. So same was the case of this colonial power and rule or of colonizers, that the moment they find that the language that was spoken by the colonized countries, the values that they were holding, the practices that were doing in terms of eating, in terms of wearing, in terms of dressing, means in overall way, if you just evaluate the lifestyle and ideology of the colonized people, how it is represented by the colonizers, and the day it was identified by the colonized that what colonizers they think about us, at that very moment this discourse begins. So I will come in my next lecture with this discourse analysis, because this very discourse term of Foucault, Edward Said makes use of, and he begins his crisis in Orientalism with a kind of textual discourse. As I mentioned in my previous talk also, that his Orientalism is itself a revisionist text where he is trying to rewrite history, okay, because the policy which Commonwealth countries they made, means the who was making the policy, Britain was heading the metropolis of the Commonwealth nations was nobody else but Britain, and Britain was making policy, and policy was that to keep away these writers from the canonical position, or these writings must not be the part of canon. So in my next lecture I will come with this focus on discourse, and then I will begin Edward Said. Thank you.